a gute Woche. Ein bisschen Gesundheit began Farbrengen this afternoon, but today is Shabbos Mevorchim Iyar. We bless the new month of Iyar, incoming month of Iyar. The way the system is arranged, whenever we bless the new month, we are still in the old month. But while we are still in the old month, we always say the bracha for the new month. This is the system every month. In general, this is the concept of mashpia and mekabel, the Rebbe continued, that the entire world is set up in such a way that there is the one that gives, he's the mashpia, and then we always have the mekabel, the one who's the recipient. Regarding to what we are talking now, it's the month of Nisan is mashpia, the month of Iyar is the mekabel. And getting to the inyan of mashpia mekabel, the Rebbe got into a lengthy explanation that the entire world is really set up in such a way. And here the Rebbe brought the famous Chazal that David HaMelech asked by the Rebishter, why is it that the way the world is set up in such a way that there is always the one who is not capable of earning his own living, and he has to come on to somebody else to help him. The Rebishter is so powerful, so the Rebishter, just as he's powerful to take care of all needs of all people, he could also see to it that those people who are in need of assistance from others, that they shouldn't have to come on to this assistance, and the Rebishter should feed them directly. As the Rebbe explained, that we say constantly, we pray, Al tatzrichenu l'dei matnas basav adam, that we should not have to come on to a gift from anybody. So everyone prays this. This is prayed by the rich, and this is prayed by the poor. So the poor person who prays this, he's definitely aware of the seriousness or the inconvenience of having to come on to help or to assistance from somebody else. So if so, why did the Rebishter set up the world in such a way that there is always the person who is not capable of making enough that he should be able to sustain himself, and this individual always has to come on to somebody else for help? And this is the question which David HaMelech asked by the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Rebishter answered him, Chesed ve'emes man yanzeruhu, which means, if it would be like you, David HaMelech, say, then the world will not be in a format of mashpia and mekabel. So Chesed and emes, which is the midah of Chesed, which is, again, mashpia mekabel, wherever there's an act of Chesed expressed, there's the one who's doing the Chesed, the act of generosity, and there's the one who's receiving the act, the recipient of the act. So the Rebbeinu Shalom said, if it's going to be the way you, David HaMelech, say, then Chesed ve'emes man yanzeruhu. So therefore the world, the entire world was set up in such a way. Sai b'negei Yidin, and Sai b'negei Goyim. The entire world is in such a format that it all works in a way of mashpia and mekab. Memela, getting into what's negeya us, we are discussing the months of Iyar and Nisan and Iyar. It's also in a way of mashpia and mekab. Rav and Talmud, again the same idea, mashpia and mekab. There's the one that gives, and the Talmud is the one that receives. He's the recipient from his Rav, from his Rebbe, from his teacher. Regarding the 2 months of Nisan and Iyar, the Rebbe continued, we find major differences. Nisan is the month of Chodesh HaGeula. There's a famous Medrash. The Medrash tells us, Mishabochar b'Yankov u'Banov, when the Rebishter chose Yaakov and his children, Kova lahem Chodesh shel Geula. That is when he set aside a month of Geula. So Nisan stands for the inyan of Geula. There's a famous Gemara. The Gemara says, Haroye Nisan b'chaloim. If somebody in his dream sees the word Nissen, Gemara says he should expect Nisei Nisim, a load of Nisim, a load of miracles. Why? Because the word Nissen is composed of two nuns, Nisei Nisim. So what is the whole idea of the month of Nisan? The idea of the month of Nisan is where godliness, where Gettlichkeit is seen, it is revealed, and we see the hand of the Rebishter, how the Rebishter performs Nisan. This is what Yitzias Mitzrayim was a tremendous nes. So the higher month of Nisan reflects the concept of Nisim. What is the idea of a nes, of a miracle? The idea of a nes is that godliness is revealed. The Yad Hashem is seen. Here the Rebbe brought in another example. For example, Purim. Purim, which we just celebrate before Nisan, which is in the month of Adar. In fact, there's the famous expression, Mismach Geula leGeula, to bring close one nest to another, the Nes of Purim to the Nes of Pesach. However, in the Nes of Purim, there's no godliness seen. In fact, Rabbi explained, now, when we read the Megillah today, and we put together all of the events, we can already see the inyan of a Hashgacha Pratis, how the Rebishter was leading from one thing to another, how all of these things happened, and this led to the miracle of Purim. Those Yidden that lived through it, they Bechlal didn't see the Nes. One event happened once, another event which led to the miracle of the Megillah didn't happen till a long time later. And the same other details. So it took really an extension of years for all these events to accumulate until all of this finally put together the Nes of Purim. Explaining this in the Rebbe said a Taich, he said Megillah. He says he's bringing out the difference how now when we read the Megillah, in the Megillah we could already get some sort of an inclination on the Nes. However, when it happened, it was even yet more concealed. So he says Megillah stems from the word Gilui, to reveal. So that is why in the Megillah the Nes is more revealed than to those people, for example, who lived through it, and those people who were following all those events. For following those events, you not necessarily were compelled to see the Hashgacha Pratis of one event leading to another. However, let us get back to Nisan. In Nisan, godliness is obvious. The Nisim here, the miracles here, are the Gettlichkeit, the Yad Hashem is outstanding, everybody can see it. What is the inyan of the month of Iyar? Regarding the month of Iyar, there are two abbreviations. One abbreviation is, Iyar is spelled Aleph Yud Yud Reish, Ani Hashem Reifecha. I am the Rebishter who is the one that's curing. What is the cure of Hashem? The cure of Hashem is in such a way that not that Chas v'Shalom a person will be sick and he will be cured, but l'katchila lo yasim alecha, he wouldn't come to any sickness to begin with. That's the cure of Hashem. That's one abbreviation of Iyar. What is another abbreviation of Iyar? Another abbreviation of Iyar is Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Rachel. This has to do with what's explained in Chassidus, the inyan of the Merkava. What does all of this mean as far as the Avodah of Iyar? As far as the Avodah of Iyar, here we are already in a position where godliness is not seen. Gettlichkeit is, you cannot compare how Gettlichkeit is obvious in the month of Nisan as to what it is like in the month of Iyar. And now we say that Nisan is the mashpia. How do we have the koiches to be able to be involved in world, in the Welt, and in the world to fulfill the wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? What is the inyan of Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Rachel? Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Rachel, we just mentioned they are a merkava, like a wagon. So on one hand, they are totally dedicated to the Eibishter. But on the other hand, a wagon is a mitzias, is something in itself. But we say that this wagon is totally dedicated is being lets itself being led by whoever is leading the wagon. The same we are saying regarding Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Rachel. But on the other hand, it expresses the idea of Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Rachel. Merkava is the idea of being a Metzias in itself. So here we have how a person is in Welt, and a person is in a Metzias and in Farzich. And nonetheless, in here he also has the koyach to bring in Getlichkeit and fulfill the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Where do we get the koyachas for this? The koyachas for this we get from the month of Nisan. Talking about the inyan of the cure of Iyar, that Iyar is a cure which comes directly from the Rebishter, and a cure which comes directly from the Rebishter is in other words, such type of a cure that there's no sickness there to begin with. In a preventive way. In other words, to see to it that we shouldn't be ill, look at Chila. So here the Rebbe mentioned an incident, I mentioned it a while ago in Farbrengen as well, that the Frierdiker Rebbe visited Eretz Yisrael. On his way back from Eretz Yisrael, that is when the pogroms in Hebron broke out in 1929. And when the news reached the boat, the Frierdiker Rebbe felt very bad. And he took it to heart to such an extent that it affected his health. On the same boat where the Frierdiker Rebbe was traveling, there was the famous Dr. Wallach, the one who was, I think he founded the Shari Tzedek Hospital. So Dr. Wallach was on the same boat. And he cured the Frierdiker Rebbe. Took care of the Rebbe. After the Rebbe felt better, goes into the Rebbe and he says that he really is at fault that the Rebbe didn't feel well. And he explains himself. Explains because Milmaila, the wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is that the Rebbe should be well. The Rebbe has to be well because everybody needs him. Everybody needs a healthy Rebbe. So had he not been on the boat, then the Frierdiker Rebbe wouldn't have gotten ill. Why? Because there wouldn't have been anybody to cure him. It's because Milmaila was seen that he was on the boat. So there was already somebody to take care of the Rebbe. So this led to the fact that the Rebbe didn't feel. The Rebbe was trying to bring this out, that at times there's an inyan, look at Chila, that the Machla shouldn't come. The Rebbe said this is what Dr. Wallach told the Rebbe. What the Rebbe answered him, the Frierdiker Rebbe answered him, the Rebbe says he doesn't know. The Rebbe says he himself heard this incident from the Frierdiker Rebbe. Frierdiker Rebbe told it to him, but he only told him this part. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was probably aware, the Rebbe added on, that if it was told to him, he will relate it further. So, Frierdiker Rebbe was definitely aware that he will repeat it. Getting back now to the month of Iyar, which we are entering. Here the Rebbe explained another inyan, that when we say every month, we say in Birchas HaChodesh, when we bench the new Chodesh, we express ourselves with a special bracha for the new month. L'chayim u'l'shalom, l'sasein u'l'simcha, l'shu u'l'nacham. Though this is said every month, we don't differentiate here anything specific for any special month. Nonetheless, for every month, there's its special bracha. And it is designed to give every month its special bracha. The Rebbe brought a very interesting comparison. We have, in the Torah we know, the inyan of the Nesiim. The Nesiim which we just recited in the month of Nisan. In the Nesiim we find that the Torah repeats exactly what every Nasi brought. Every Nasi brought the identical saying, and it's repeated again in the Torah. We know that in the Torah every word is extremely limited, and every word is extremely accurate. So the Torah the Rebbe could have set it up in a different way. To say that the Torah should have said what the first Nasi did, and to say that everybody else repeated him, this may seem that we're giving a special chshivas to the first. But the Torah could have done different. Torah could have listed the names of all the Nesiim together, in one sequence, and say that all of these Nesiim, each and every one, on a different day, brought the following code. And why repeat the same minyan 12 times? So it's explained in Chassidus. If it would have been this way, then we would have think that it's a repeat. Every day is a repeat. Truth is, the physical korban was identical by each one of the Nesiim. However, as far as the kavanos and as far as the spiritual idea, which is behind every korban varied from one sheva to another. So that is why the Torah cannot include it into one, because it's really 12 separate different inyan. And different achievements and different accomplishments which were accomplished by every shevet separately. So that is why the Torah has to spell it out separately for each and every shevet. Same the Rebbe says is regarding the bracha which is given to each and every month. Though we use the same expression, however, every month has his inyan, his specialty, what we are supposed to excel in that month, and therefore the bracha is also designed in such a way to give every month its special bracha, what is needed for that month. Later the Rebbe continued regarding today's day. Specifically, this inyan which we just spoke has a shayches in general to the months of Nisan and Iyar. And as mentioned, that Shabbos Mevorchin Iyar always has to come out to be in the month of Nisan. However, it could vary as far as which day in the month of Nisan. The later part of the month, the last days of the month, but again, it could be in different days. This year, today, it is 26 days in the month of Nisan. We want to find an inyan regarding dates, there's a Megillas Tainus. Megillas Tainus lists things which have transpired on many days. And also, there are many days which are listed in Megillas Tainus as Tanesim. But today, these are not the Tanesim which we follow. The Gemara uses the expression Megillas Tainus Botla. The inyanim, the matters which are discussed in Megillas Tainus, are no longer relevant. Rebbe explained it today. Just like we say regarding La'asid Lavai, that then the fast days which we have today are going to be bottled. There will no longer be fast days. It will be Hayomim Ha'elu Yahafchu L'Sasin L'Simcha. All these days of sadness will be turned to days of joy. This is already a beginning of it. The fact that the days which are listed in Megillas Tainus as days of fast are no longer days of fast. This is already a taste of the inyan of Hayom Emeilu Yavchol Asasin L'Simcha. So regarding Chavav Nisan, it is mentioned in Megillas Tainus that it is the Yortzeit of Yeshua. Yeshua ben Nun. Yeshua, the disciple of Moshe. And regarding Yeshua, as we say today in Pirkei Avos, in today's Pirkei Avos, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, u'mesara li Yeshua. Moshe's closest disciple was who? Yeshua. And Yeshua was the one that related Torah further on. Yeshua was the one that walked the Yidden into Eretz Yisrael. He was the one that led Yidden into Eretz Yisrael, which means that the eternity of Torah, that Torah remains with us until today's date, it was channeled through whom? It was channeled through Yeshua. Yeshua was a disciple of Moshe. Moshe got the Torah from the Rebishter. And the Rebishter, who was Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, so we know the abbreviation of Anoichi, Ano Nafshi Ksavis Yehovis, I, my soul, have written and dedicated, Rebishter has put himself into Torah, and this was given to Moshe, and was given to Yeshua to the Zkenim, until it reached us. And that is why we find a remarkable thing regarding Torah, that Natzchuni Banai Natzchunai. It's explained in Gemara, and it's stressed a lot in Chassidus. The concept that once the Rebishter has given Yidden the Torah, the Yidden have the koiches that a psak halacha is accepted the way a bezin shel mata will paskin it, and not the way the bezin shel maila will paskin it. If a shaila will come up in halacha today, the authority of decision is given to whom? To Yidden, as we are here in this world. So So this is the day, Chavav Nisan, is the day which, in other words, this day brings out the idea of the giving over of Torah from Moshe, as it finally and ultimately reached to each and every one of us. Rebbe concluded the Sicha, Mele the same, when Yidden beg the Rebishter ad Mosai, because Yidden no longer want to be in Golas. As the Rebbe was using this as a continuation, being that Yidden are so powerful, that Natzchuni bana Natzchunai, that even when it comes to matters of Torah, the final decision is in the hands of Yidden. So Mele, regarding the union of requesting that the Rebishter sends us Mashiach and take us out of Golas, how Yidden are begging ad Mosai, this request will also be accepted, and the wish of Yidden will be accepted that the Rebishter will send Mashiach Tzidkeinu and take us out of Golas. Before, when the Rebbe was talking about the months of Nisan and Iyar, explained that in general the summer months are hard months for Avodas Hashem. It is hard, and that is why it is brought in Svarim that when the trees, Hayilonois Melavlavos, he used the expression, that when the trees begin to blossom and it becomes a summer weather, that is when we begin reciting Pirkei Avos every Shabbos. Why? Because these are the months when we need an extra zehiros. For the Milah de Chasidus, the words of Chassidus which are expressed in Pirkei Avos, we need an extra Nesinas Koyach. We are in need of extra strength to be able to go through the Avodah of the summer. Mentioning the Avodah of the summer, Rabbi also mentioned that there are those that right after Pesach, they immediately have very, very strong worries on their minds, where they're going to travel for vacation. It's already after Pesach. And in these countries, thank God, where we are living in comfortable means. So immediately we begin thinking, where could we go for vacation? And we start asking and inquiring, and one talks to another, whether it's the husband or it's the wife, and the money are begun to be spent. Everything is already set to start looking what type of a vacation, how is the vacation going to be used during the summer months. And the Rebbe explained, says regarding Rabbeinu HaKadosh, B'Yehuda Nasi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, we refer to him as HaKadosh. It was Heilig. That's how all Yidden referred to him constantly with this title of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Find something very interesting. Find the Gemara says that he was extremely wealthy. Gemara uses the expression that snoin, the chazeres, various vegetables, horseradish and vegetables, radishes, were constantly on his table. Never went off his table. Not during the summer, not during the winter. This is an expression that seems like in those days not everybody was able to afford it, but on Rabbeinu HaKadosh it never went off his table. On the other hand, we find, regarding Rabbeinu HaKadosh, who on one hand Chazal tell us that he was a wealthy person, we find regarding Rabbeinu HaKadosh that he did not enjoy from this world afilu etzba ktana, even the size of one small finger. So Rabbi says regarding situations which we are in now, in other words, he mentioned that the idea of vacation, this is something which is in the countries, to use the expression outsays haravacha, these countries where Yidden are living comfortable. So let the Rebishter help that Yidden should be able to live comfortable and have harchava, have whatever they need. But let it be in a way like it was by Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He had everything, but at the same time, when it comes to enjoy, Nana, Chazal tell us that loy nana ma'ilam hazeh, he did not enjoy this world, afilu ke'etz baktan. Later in the Farbrengen, as it's customary, the Rebbe learns an Indian in Parshas HaShavua and the Rashis, as well as an Indian in Rambam and an Indian in Pirkei Avos. The Rebbe also spoke another Indian today, in continuation to what he spoke, Achin Shel Pesach in the Farbrengen. Achin Shel Pesach in the Farbrengen, the Rebbe raised the question, we know there is a mitzvah of chinuch, which means it is the obligation of parents to educate their children. Question arises, is this mitzvah a midaraisa chiyuv, a chiyuv min ha-Torah, or is this only a chiyuv midarabban? From the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch, we see, the Rebbe says in two places, in fact, in Hilchos Shabbos and in Hilchos Talmud Torah, that the obligation of chinuch, the mitzvah of chinuch, is only a chiyuv midarabbanon, it is not a chiyuv min ha-Torah. However, the Rebbe says, there is a Ramban. The Ramban tells us, it's a Ramban in Chumash. The Ramban uses the expression, if we will not educate our children, how will they know what to do when they are supposed to do it? So we see from the Ramban that there is room to say that the Ramban holds that it is a chiyuv min ha-Torah. But again, this is a Ramban in Chumash. Achashal Pesach, I mentioned the Rebbe spoke about this Indian at length, spoke about it today again. Achashal Pesach, the Rebbe explained, in mitzvahs we find two things. We find that there is a mitzvah and there is a hechsher mitzvah. Hechsher mitzvah means a preparation for a mitzvah. Not every mitzvah we can just go ahead and do the mitzvah and not have to prepare for it. For example, we put on tefillin. There's a way to process the tefillin. There's a way to make tefillin. Tefillin are not just created the way they are. So there's a sefer, or anybody else who's involved in the system of making tefillin, writing tefillin, making the retzuas, making the batim, all the details that are required for making the tefillin. Now, is there one going to say that just because all of this is needed to make the tefillin, that the making of the tefillin is a mitzvah? The making of the tefillin is not a mitzvah. In no way is it a mitzvah. It's a hechsher mitzvah. It's a preparing for a mitzvah. The same the Rebbe says, when we are talking regarding the obligation of being mechanech children, we cannot say that this is a mitzvah min ha-Torah. It is a hechsher mitzvah. It's the parents have to prepare children that when they become bar chiyuva, meaning when they are obligated to do things on their own, we have to train them that they should know how to do it. But this obligation of training them is not a mitzvah in itself. It's not a mitzvah min ha-Torah, the inyan of chinuch. Today the Rebbe added on, spoke the same inyan, and added on, elaborated the inyan. For example, by Torah, we find Vishinantam levanecha. There's an obligation of teaching children Torah. This, the Rebbe says, is not part of the mitzvah of chinuch. This is part of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. The mitzvah of Talmud Torah has a detail in it that we also have to teach children. The fact that when there's the mitzvah of Hakel, after the year of Shemitah, when everybody, men, women, children, infants, everybody has to come to Yerushalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash, and listen to the Kohen Gadol. The fact that children, to the Melech, thank you. The fact that children are obligated to come then, parents have to bring the children. Again, this is not because of the mitzvah of chinuch. This is a prat in the mitzvah of Hakel. A prat in the mitzvah of Hakel is not only that adults have to come, but children also have to come. And the Rebbe brought more and more examples. For example, the Rebbe says, a geir, somebody who converts and becomes a geir, that doesn't mean that while he is a goy, before he became a geir, he has to make sure that he knows how to fulfill all the mitzvahs. Doesn't mean. Once he becomes a yid, that is when his obligation begins, that he has to fulfill mitzvahs. Well, the Rebbe brought an example. The Mishkan was built, and we know how much effort went into the Mishkan. Reading the Torah tells us how much effort went into the Mishkan to erect the Mishkan properly. This was the erecting of the Mishkan. Then there was the Avodah which had to be done in the Mishkan. So while building the Mishkan, they were not working or preparing for the Avodah which had to be done in the Mishkan. This is something, once the Mishkan is there, that is when you get involved and start doing what you have to do. The same the Rebbe is learning as far as, in other words, there is no mitzvah of preparing what to do in the Mishkan before the Mishkan is there. The same when we're talking about chinuch. Chinuch means that we have to educate children before they become bara bas mitzvah. That's what chinuch means. So that when they are bara bas mitzvah, they should know exactly what to do. We have to do it, but to say that they're educating them, this in itself is a mitzvah min ha-Torah, this is not so. Talking about the inyan of chinuch bichlal, Rabbi says we're about to enter the summer months. And the summer months is a time when children who are in school, so the lemudei choil, the secular studies which are usually learned in yeshivas, are not learned during the summer months. The Mele the Rebbe says summer is a proper time to see to it that the children are in a proper environment, and it is the obligation of the institutions as well as the parents. Rabbi criticized those institutions that close for the summer and do not want to take an interest in their students during the summer because it's vacation time. This is not the right way to do it. He says when you send children home from yeshiva and you leave them up to their parents, sometimes it's going to work, so that the parents will be able to take care of them properly, and the child will spend a summer where he will gain what he's supposed to, and sometimes it will not work. So when it will not work, it's a problem. So therefore the Rebbe urged very strongly that the summer months be utilized properly. It's the obligation of the institutions, of the meistes, where the children learn, to see to it that every child utilizes the summer months in a proper way. Rebbe says there are those parents that think that being that a child has learned all day during the school year, therefore, how can we demand from a child that the child should learn more? This is not so. On the contrary, it's only for the benefit of the child, and it's much better for children that the children should be in a proper environment, and that they should learn. And on the contrary, that during the summer months, being that there are no secular studies which children have to attend in the yeshivas, so here we have an opportunity to give them more of the Limudei Kodesh. Rabbi urged very strongly that the summer months should be utilized properly, and see to it that every child is in a proper environment during the summer months. The Chumash is in Parsha Shemini, towards the end of the Sedre, in Kapitel Yud Aleph, Pasuk Mem Daled and Mem Hey. Pasuk there says, Ki ani Hashem Elokeichem, v'yiskadishtem v'yisem kedoshim, and you shall be sanctified and be holy, ki kodesh ani, because I am holy, the Rebishter says. V'lo yisitamu es nafsheseichem, b'chol asher etzaroy mes al haaretz. And don't make your souls tamei by eating insects. This parsha comes as a continuation to what we learned, all the dinim of kashrus. Mela, it's another time the Torah is mentioning the severeness of eating worms and insects, that this brings tumah upon the soul of the person that eats it. So the Torah says, don't eat it. Then the pasuk continues in pasuk Mem Hey. Ki ani Hashem hamala eschem eretz Mitzrayim. I am the Rebbe that has taken you out of Mitzrayim. Li yislachem le'elakim. V'yisem k'doshim, thou should be sanctified, ki kodesh oni, because the Rebbe says he is holy as well. Rebbe says sometimes we discuss in Yonim questions in a Rashi itself, and sometimes questions are discussed in the pasuk, which are obvious questions. And the question arises, why doesn't Rashi mention anything to explain such type of a question? Actually, we have a repeat. Pasuk says two psukim, one after another, and both of them bring out the same idea. And pasuk Mem Daled, the pasuk says v'yisem k'doshim ki kodesh ani, and the pasuk Mem Hey, the pasuk says v'yisem k'doshim ki kodesh ani. A repeat of the same idea of one pasuk after another. But very interesting. On one hand, it is repeated. On the other hand, in pasuk Mem Daled, there is something added. V'yiskadishtem, you shall sanctify yourself, and you shall be holy because I am holy. And pasuk Mem Hey, the v'yiskadishtem is not mentioned. There's no v'yiskadishtem here stressing you shall sanctify yourself. This is not said. Pasuk just goes on, v'yisem k'doshim, thou shalt be holy, sanctified ki kodesh ani, because The Rebishter is. So the Rebbe explained this, being that here the Torah is telling us the importance of kashrus, and regarding eating worms and insects, this is repeated in the Torah even more than once. It is repeated 4 and 5 times. Why take? Because the Torah wanted that if a person does transgress one of these averes, then it will be considered he does eat one of these worms. Not that he was over on 1 avera, he was over on 4, he was over on 5. Just like this is brought out in the negative way, for the one who transgresses and sins, the Rebbe is stressing it in the positive way as well. The one who will not eat it will be Kaddish, will be holy. So that is why it is repeated twice. V'yisem k'doshim, thou shalt be holy, thou shalt be sanctified, ki Kaddish ani. However, Pasuk Memhei begins, Ki ani Hashem ha'amar le'eschem eretz Mitzrayim, the Rebishter who has brought you out of Mitzrayim. And the Pasuk uses the expression ha'amar le'eschem, who has lifted you up from Mitzrayim. In other words, not only did the Rebishter take us out physically from Mitzrayim, but the Rebishter lifted us up spiritually as well. In Mitzrayim, we mingled Mitzrayim with the lowest of all the nations. What did the Rebishter do? He took us out of Mitzrayim to uplift us, to bring us close to Him. As Rashi here says, on the Pasuk Ani Hashem Amar Le'eschem, Rashi says, Al menashe tekablu mitzvosai ha'leisi eschem. Why did I take you out of Mitzrayim? On the condition that you will accept my mitzvahs, I took you out of Mitzrayim. So the Pasuk here is stressing how the Rebishter has uplifted the Yidden. In other words, I use the term, the Isarusa de Le'ele, the awakening from Lamaila, which came from the Rebishter to Yidden. That's why there is no room here that the Pasuk should say, V'hiskadishtem, you shall make yourself holy, you shall make yourself sanctify yourself, because the Pasuk here is talking how the Rebishter is sanctifying us, how the Rebishter has uplifted us. The Rebishter has uplifted us, and this has brought holiness into us, that as the Pasuk continues, V'yisem k'doshim ki kodeshoni. So that is why the first time the Pasuk does say, V'hiskadishtem, however, once the Pasuk has said already, Ani Hashem ha'amar le'eschem eretz Mitzrayim, there's no room here to stress V'hiskadishtem. It's not up to you V'hiskadishtem. Here the Kedusha came from the Rebishter. The Rebishter was Malo, his son, who took us out of Mitzrayim and brought Kedusha into us. It's customary that in the summer weeks, when we recite Pirkei Avos, that the Rebbe also explains a Mishnah in the Perek which is recited on that day. And today it is the first Perek of Pirkei Avos. And in the first Perek of Pirkei Avos, we have a very famous Mishnah. The Mishnah of Asei L'Chorav. Mishnah of Asei L'Chorav is in today's Perek. But interesting, it's mentioned twice. First it is mentioned in Mishnah Daled. No, I'm sorry. Further. I'm sorry, Vov. Yeshua ben Prachya, Asei L'Chorav, provide yourself with a teacher, Uknei L'Chol Chaver, acquire for yourself a friend, V'havei done as kol adam l'kaf schus, and be done every person favorably. Judge everyone favorably. Then we have it again at the end of the Perek. Tezayin. Rabbi Gamliel hayoyim. Rabbi Gamliel would often say, Asei l'chorav, v'histalek min asofik, and go away from doubts, v'al tarbe la'aser umodois. In other words, when you give Maisa, don't give estimations. Don't. An umod is an estimation, not the exact amount. Make sure that you give the right amount. In other words, this comes as a continuation. Get away from doubts. Get away from doubts to such an extent that when you give Maisa, you should also know that you give accurate.
and don't give estimations. What is estimate? Being that we see that Asei L'Chorav is mentioned twice in the Perek, each time it is mentioned together with different inyanim. So we must say that the inyanim, that each of the times that Asei L'Chorav is mentioned, is relevant to whatever Asei L'Chorav that particular Mishnah is talking about. In general, the Rebbe says the concept of Asei L'Chorav, which he's been talking about, which recently in Farbrengen is demanding from us, this is not what the Mishnah here is referring to. Why? Because Pirkei Avos is Mila de Chasidusa, which means things which we are supposed to do beyond our call of duty. Things which are Hasidic requirements. Mila de Chasidusa, that's the interpretation. Why does the Gemara call it Mila? It's a Gemara. Why does the Gemara call it Mila de Chasidusa? Because the Gemara says that a Chasid, in Gemara terminology, a Chasid acts lifnim mishuras hadin. So that is why the inyanim that are mentioned in Pirkei Avos are in the category of lifnim mishuras hadin, more than the obligation of din, more than we are obligated to do by din. So we must say that Asei L'Chorav, which is discussed here, is discussed on a different level, on a higher level. In other words, a person who is at a higher madrege, and to him the Mishnah is addressing itself Asei L'Chorav. In the first Mishnah is referring to Asei L'Chorav, a person as far as his association with other people. As far as his association with other people, so there are three categories with people how he associates. There are those people that are in the realm of Asei L'Chorav, people that he has to look up to, respect them, because they can be his Rav. He also has to associate with other people. He has to have Chaverim. It's not good for a person to be alone. To be a loner, the Mishnah stresses, is not healthy. Therefore, Uknei L'Chachava, go ahead and acquire friends. Make sure you have friends. Uknei L'Chachava, acquire friends. Then there's the relation of the person with the rest of the world. As far as the rest of the world, the Mishnah tells us, have they done as kol ha'adam? Every person you have to judge favorably. And who is the one that says this Mishnah? This is a quotation of Yeshua ben Parachia. Regarding Rabbi Yeshua ben Parachia, Rabbi says we find something. Gemara tells us that Rabbi Yeshua ben Parachia went ahead after Oisei Ha'ish, after Yoshke, and he tried to bring him back to Tshuva. He made an attempt to bring him back to Tshuva. So in Mela we see how Rabbi Yeshua ben Parachia looks with warmth at every Yid. So that is why he's the one that says that every person has to have some sort of association with everyone, Asei L'Chorav, or Knei L'Chachava, or at least have they done, but it must be as kol adam, every person you have to look at favorably. Then we come to the last Mishnah, the latter Mishnah, which is also a quotation of Rabbi Gamliel. Gamliel here says, Asei L'Chorav. So the Rebbe compared it. Chassidus, it's explained regarding Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Famous sage Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Mara tells us that when he reached the age of 120, before he passed away, he said, Eini yideya be'eza derech melichin oisoi. I don't know in what way I will be led. Whether he will be taken to Gehenna, this is what he thought, or he will be taken to Gan Eden. So there's a famous question. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was such an outstanding personality, lived till the age of 120. Before he passed away, that is when he begins thinking, any idea, I don't know, what did he think about all his years? Why didn't he have such thoughts at an earlier age? So Chassidus explains, all his years, he was busy. He didn't have no time for thinking. He was involved, he was busy working. What type of work did Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai do? So the Gemara tells us, 40 years he learned for himself, 40 years he taught others, and up to the third 40 years, the Gemara also tells us what he did. So he was completely occupied. He didn't even have time to think about himself. But when he was already besoif ha'avodah, it was already the very last steps when he knew that he has to part from this world already, and he doesn't have much longer to stay. That is when he began making statements. He began saying, in other words, here we're talking about a person who's besoif yamav, and he's at a high madrege, and he's beginning to think. He has sveikes. He has doubts. So the Mishnah tells us, Asei l'cha rav, this person, go ahead, acquire a rav, provide yourself with a rav. Memele, if you will have a rav, you will have a teacher. V'yistalek min hasafek, you wouldn't have no doubts. So you wouldn't have no doubts, so you'll know exactly what path to look after. You'll know exactly what to do. Furthermore, person may say, he will go l'chumrah. Mishnah says, when you give Maisa, don't give no estimates, give an exact amount. So this individual will say, I will give more than it's required. Being that I don't know exactly what is required, what the amount is, I can't calculate it exactly, I'll give yet more than it's needed. Mishnah says it's not so. A person has to know what he has to do. Asei l'cha rav. If you will have a rav, any type of suffix which you have, any type of doubt, even on what high madrege we're talking about, even on this high madrege of, let's compare somebody to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, when he expressed himself, if you have a rav, this automatically keeps you away from sveikis. Then when you give meiser, anything you do, you know exactly what to do, and you'll do everything accordingly, because you will have a rav that will give you the proper guidance. Before, when the Rebbe was talking about the Inyan of Asei l'cha rav, Rebbe mentioned the famous word there's a word from the Mittler Rebbe, that the accomplishments which are achieved when two Yidden get together. Mittler Rebbe once said that when two Yidden get together, it is two Yetzer Tovs against one Yetzer Hara. Because every one of them has a Yetzer Tov, and it's against one Yetzer Hara. Why one? There's two. Because everyone has a Yetzer Hara also. I don't know if the Rebbe said it today, but at many occasions the Rebbe explained it. Every person has his Yetzer Hara. The desire to sin, the temptation to sin, is by every person different. So when I'm in a dilemma, and I get together with somebody else, so I have my Yetzer Tov and his Yetzer Tov. My Yetzer Hara, which I have, is not activated for the same things which that person wants to do. Memele, it will work and it will help, because it's going to wind up being two Yetzer Tovs against one Yetzer Hara. It's customary in the Farbrengen that the Rebbe also learns an Inyan in the Rambam that has a shaykhus to the daily shir of the Rambam. Today it is in the Rambam in Hilchis Ishus. In the Rambam, in the shir Rambam today, a question is discussed about a person that had more than one wife. He had several women. And it's a question of paying the ksuba. Now the question arises, there's not enough money to pay the ksuba for all of them. Now there's two opinions. There's one opinion that the woman who he married earlier, being that he married her earlier, her shibud, in other words, her lien on the ksuba, has a preference to the woman whom he married later. There is another opinion that does not say so, but claims that everyone has an equal access to the ksuba, and therefore it has to be divided equally, irrelevant who married earlier and who married later. The Rebbe explained this, that in the name of the Ragachava, there's a Chakira regarding marriage, regarding Nisuyin. Is marriage something which is something constant? In other words, when a man is Mekadesh Isha, he's Mekadesh Isha, and this one-time act helps up to 120. Or he's Mekadesh Isha, and constantly, throughout all his years, the marriage is a kind of like renewed. In other words, the Rebbe didn't mention it today, he mentioned it at a previous occasion, that when the Ragachava was talking this Inyan and learning, whoever else, I think it was a Chaim Brisker who was with him, told him Mazel Tov. Why? He says, if the way you are learning, that means that you just got married again. We say that marriage is something which constantly keeps on repeating. If it's something which constantly keeps on repeating, by Yidden Fiert, when somebody gets married, you say Mazel Tov. The Rebbe is learning that these two shittas, as far as paying the ksubah, depend on this approach in marriage. If we say that marriage is something which is a one-time thing, one act, and this helps for the entire life, Memela, whoever got married first, definitely that woman, she has a lien, she has preference over the woman who got married later. Now when it comes to pay out the ksubis, the first woman should get her share before the second woman if there's not enough, so she should get a full share, and the second woman should get less if there's not enough for both of them or for the three of them, or however the case that the Rambam portrays. If we are going to learn that Nisuyin is something which is constantly repeated, this is what the Torah said. This is how the Torah learns Pshat and Nisuyin, that it's something which is constantly repeated. If we learn that way, then all of them are equal. Rebbe explained the same meaning in Avodas Hashem. As far as explaining it in Avodas Hashem, the Rebbe says there's a marriage between Yidden and the Rebishter. So there's a marriage between Yidden and the Rebishter. So one way we could look at it, there's a concept of B'chol Yom Yu Beinecha Kechadoshim, that we have to view Torah every day that it is something new, as if we have just gotten it today. This is the way of learning that the marriage is constantly being repeated. Or we say there's another derech in Avodas Hashem, that Matan Torah again will not happen. Matan Torah is something which happened once, and therefore we get our strength now to learn Torah and the shaychus to Torah and the dedication to Torah which a Yid has. We get this from the one time Matan Torah. In the Farbrengen of Achashel Pesach, as well as in today's Farbrengen, Rabbi also spoke about the new village which he wants to build in Yerushalayim. Rabbi announced it in the Farbrengen of Yud Gimel Nisan, the night before Pesach, that he is going to build a village in Yerushalayim. And this village will be primarily designated for new Russian immigrants who will be coming out and are coming out now from behind the Iron Curtain. And Achashel Pesach dike Farbrengen, as well as in today's Farbrengen, the Rebbe gave mashke. Achashel Pesach, the Rebbe gave matzahs, and today he gave mashke, and gave very, very strong brachas that this yishuv, that this village or this community should be built soon, and it should be, the Rebbe said that those people who are involved in it should be busy with it day and night. They should constantly be busy with it and see to it that until it becomes a reality and until it is there. The Rebbe says to such an extent, naturally there are things which have to be done at day, it has to be done by day, and what has to be done at night has to be done at night. But at the same time, their dedication to it should be to such an extent that even when they sleep and they have their dreams should also be about this village in Yerushalayim which they are involved in to put up. At the end of the Farbrengen also the Rebbe gave mashke for all those that gave in the mashke before Shabbos, whether it is for opening of a new Chabad house or a Siyam Rambam or any other type of a function, and this union of making all types of gatherings, any type of a Farbrengen or a gathering, the Rebbe says this is something which leads to and stresses the union of Avas Yisrael, and not only Avas Yisrael, but also Achdus Yisrael. It's an union which brings to total unity amongst Eden.